Well, friends, again, thank you for being here. You guys can have a seat this morning. It's so great to have you here, and I just want to give some shout-outs. We have some people that are not so familiar to the rest of us. We have Mill's Uncle Steve is here, and his son Garrett and Garrett's wife Rachel's here from the Knoxville area. Isn't it fun being in a smaller church? You can't hide. We just pick you guys out. Malone, I got to say hi to Malone. Hi, Malone, if you're still in here. And Isabel's friend, I get to see her, hear your name, but... we have Danny and we have Justin from Oregon. The Oregon invasion continues, my friends. Someday the organisms are going to take over in here and just... But no, we have Justin and Danny who have also seen the light, and they got out as quick as they could, which is great to have them here. Make sure to say hi to them. I don't know where they are. These lights are so bright, but you guys make sure to find them. They're the people walking around later that look confused, and that's probably them. But you guys, it's so great to have you. And Rita's back. Rita, thank you for being back. She's like, don't say my name. Again, small church problems, right? You guys, hey, I just want to give you a quick update. My name is Mark, by the way, if I haven't met you yet, and tuning in online. We read those comments. So this morning, type in if you think something. Usually on Monday, if I remember, I go back and read those comments. Love to interact with you. So go ahead and type. We'd love to read those things. Just want to give you a quick update about On Mission Church. In the next few weeks, what's going on. Obviously, Allison did a good job talking about the campaign. Hopefully when the kids come in, they walk in the lobby and they look upper left to see little Mishy as he makes progress. The more you give, the more Mishy moves. This campaign could be done in a half a year if you just go for it. This whole thing could be done and we get moving on. So I'm excited for the campaign, the journey, also the destination. Last Saturday, not yesterday, we had Charlie and Maud was in here. Some of you know Charlie. And I don't know if I can say what he does for a career because there might be like red dots all over me. Anyhow, he has a career. And in his special career, he keeps people safe. And so he did a safety training seminar in here. We had about 15 or so ministry leaders that were here, people in guest services. And he just went through like active shooter training, these unfortunate things we have to talk about in the modern life that we live. And something he brought up was just about how it's hard to be prepared for these things, so we battle through prayer, because a lot of this, if not all of it, is supernatural issues going on. But the more he talked about it, I'm like, I am so excited for us to have a very different kids wing. Like the one we have now is not ideal. And I'm so excited for a new building in the future where we can have one entry point with someone at a desk, and that's the same exit point with the check-in station. Right now, there's like 3 different entry points. So, church, I'm pumped to get us to our next home. I'm super excited. I know we'll get there together. But the next few weeks, we have one more Sunday of our series, Wales. And then after that, you're going to have some wisdom up front. We're not going to have someone in their 30s communicating on Sunday morning for one morning. So you get a benefit from this. I get to sit and receive as well. So my father-in-law, Dr. David Stevens, will be here to give you some wisdom. So he's actually going to walk through our campaign passage, which is Isaiah 54, verse 2 specifically. And he's just going to kind of exegetically unwrap that. What does it mean to enlarge our tent? Why do we have Mishy on a wall, little mini Brandon with a rope over his shoulder moving, doing this? So hopefully that ties in with his message as we get to go. So that's on the 30th, Memorial Day weekend. So if you're out, I know Brandon warned me, he's like, Mark, don't be discouraged. Like our people, they like to kind of move in summer and not stay home. There's like this thing called Florida. If you've ever heard of Florida, it's somewhere down there. And they've heard of it, and there's beaches and stuff. So I know you travel in the summer, but please still be engaged. So these are archives, these messages. You can go on Facebook and check out the messages. You can watch them whenever you want. And let me know if you're going to be on a road trip, you just listen to the audio. Let me know. I want to give you a shout out on the journey. It's fun with the kids in the car. Like, hey, what's up? Fill in the blank to your family. So let me know. So don't be disengaged this summer because we have a lot of good stuff going on. The month of June, I like to pick one month a year where I focus on vision and staff development, and that month will be June. And so I'm going to take those 4 Sundays off just to focus on other things. We'll make a trip back to Oregon for a short stint and come back. And it's so great to have Pastor Brandon on staff that can bring it, as we saw last week, and bring it well. He's an amazing, clear communicator. Great things going on, my friends. Now, our series that we're in is called Wales. And so as most of you have been here for this. So we're just walking through this crazy story of Jonah. Now, you need to enter back into kind of a kid mindset because a lot of you got the story of Jonah, again, in Sunday school. You saw the picture on the wall of a whale. He's smiley. Everybody's all happy. Of course, there's probably like no nothing that looked realistic or true to life that was on the wall. But you kind of get this image of what it was like, and then you grow up. You go through different seasons of life, and you maybe have a different image of the story of Jonah. And so David Daniel just caught my eye, but this morning he said, man, I can't wait to see where you're going with this in chapter 4. It's bizarre, super bizarre. Even last night I was on the couch, I'm like, man, there are 20 different angles from this. I try to pick one for you, and in sermon development, it's kind of like picturing this big chunk of marble, and you start chiseling, and you hope by Sunday morning you have something there in the middle, what God wants for us to understand from the text. But before we enter into this series talking about this bitter, weird guy named Jonah, I want to invite you back in a journey in my life. As I think about bitterness, this morning we'll talk a lot about bitterness. This last week I was reflecting back to one of the darkest files in my memory bank. It's called middle school. Some of you know what I'm talking about. So most of you survived that. Maybe we have a few people here today that are still in that. But it gives me just the shakes to think back to middle school life. Body's changing. I'm confused. The voices used to be like this, and then boom, one day all of a sudden my mom's like, what happened to you? And just things are changing. You got zits and just the weirdness of middle school life. But for me, middle school was brutal. It was so damaging. And so my parents, they were new believers when they had my sister and they had myself, trying to figure out this thing called Christianity. And my dad had we talked about this before, his coworkers, friend, this guy named Mark, they kept talking about Jesus to my dad. And so my dad finally realized, okay, this must be true. And so they named me after Mark, who's now a pastor up in Canada. I hope to meet him someday. But and my parents, they did a great job. They raised us kids biblically. And so we were raised up in a home where we learned to respect everyone. So it doesn't matter what size or shape or skin color or hair color, it didn't matter. We grew up respecting them. And then I remember being in middle school, like 6th grade, little backpack. I remember this moment, and I realized really quick that not everyone else had the same upbringing. And it was brutal. I remember being in the hallway, just trying to walk down, navigate the halls of middle school and walk in. I remember this one guy, he would just grab my wrist, this big football player, it's always a big football player. He'd grab my wrist, and he would pull me the opposite direction. And I just like, it was this innocent, very much slender guy back then, right? Just a stick. If I turn sideways, like, where'd he go? Oh, there he is. Where'd he go? And so he would just pull me the opposite direction. And so I'm like just turning red. I'm not going to fight this guy. I'm just, please stop. And so I got to the point, I'm looking down hallways, and I'm like scanning the heads first to see where he was. Now in years, decades later, it's kind of funny to me now, but in the moment, it was so painful. It was so tough. I developed this bitterness in my heart towards him and others that would bully me. And I just didn't fight back. I remember one time watching this girl, Brandy, had enough, and she started just whacking this guy with a hairbrush. It's kind of awkward. I'm like, thank you. It's kind of weird. You're a girl. You're defending me. But this bitterness in my heart started to rise to the surface. And in 6th grade, 7th grade, I just started to journal. So I would go out on our property there in this field behind us. We had 5 acres and horses, and I would go out and just sit there, and I would just journal in the heat of the sun. I remember in the afternoons, and I would just journal through the summer of just all my hate to people in my life. I would pen everything. I would list names, all the bullies, people that just were just difficult in life. I would just write page after page of how much I hated them, how much I couldn't stand them, what I would want to have happen to them. This is a big journal. I would just sit there in the field and I would just write this, and then all this bitterness would come to the surface, and I thought I was somehow medicating the issue, and it wasn't actually doing anything helpful. And this morning, as we look at a very bitter guy in the Old Testament, who's just there's no other way to describe him. He's just a bitter, weird guy. And sometimes we see in the scripture, we have descriptive explanation of a genre or a text, and you have prescriptive. And so a lot of times we read things in the Old Testament, it's just a description of how things were, not a prescription for us today. But then there are other passages that are more, okay, this is a prescription for us today. And so we have to know what that is. Well, Jonah, some things we can learn from him of what to do, but it's mostly what not to do in the stories. For one thing for you today is this: never trust your tongue when your heart is bitter. It's amazing what comes to the surface and out of the mouth, even though you have a smile on your face and people say, "How are you?" "I'm good." And then you wonder why you're edgy with them. You wonder why you just said that. You wonder why you just posted that. And your friends are like, "What's up with you?" "Oh, I'm good." But there's something in your heart. So never trust your tongue when your heart is bitter. So as we continue on this journey of this very odd story of Jonah, in the series called Whales, I like to look at the story in a way. It's kind of like God said, "Go." Jonah said, "No." And God said, "Oh." And so now we see the consequences. And we see that some of you have tasted this before in life as Jonah went down from Jerusalem to Joppa, down from the dock into the boat, and was thrown overboard and went down into the sea, down into the mouth and the blubbery goo of this giant whale thing, down, down, down. When we run away from God, there's only one way to go, and that's down. Some of you have tasted this before. You have tried so hard in your pursuit to do your life, and you wonder why it's a spiral that just keeps going down. Why is everything against? Why is my life falling apart? It's because when we run from God, the only place to go is down. So Jonah, we look at this guy. He's weird. He's a prophet with a bad attitude. He's a melancholy man on his monthly cycle. That's how I like to address to him. Just one of those guys, you're like, what is up with this guy? This is Jonah. We're not going to try to paint a different image of who he could have been. This is just what's described in the text. He's a weird guy. And Pastor Brandon last week brought it, this big moment where he has his second chance in life, gets spit out of the whale, he's on dry land. Okay, God asks him again, okay, you're going to do this. Here's your orders. Let's try this again. So the second chance, this work of grace from God. Go to Nineveh, because God said to go to Nineveh. We saw Jonah go the opposite direction to Tarshish, a.k.a. Spain. So he's like, okay, I have a second chance. So he finally goes to Nineveh, and Pastor Brandon walked through this last week. He goes to Nineveh, maybe 120,000 people, walks in the gate, says one sentence, and everyone repented. Everyone. If this was me, if right now I had a stage with all of Mableton, all of Smyrna, a hint of even Douglasville, if they're all there, and if I walk up and just say one sentence, the band's done, they do the thing, I just say one sentence, in 40 days there will be destruction. Have a good lunch. You have crickets. Maybe, I don't know, but Jonah tasted this. He got to see the fruit of this. He didn't even say, hey, you need to repent and do this and, fold your hands and pray by your bed and confess Jesus into your heart and bring him in. He just said, hey, in 40 days there will be destruction because God said go preach against them. Now, if this happened, if all of Mableton and Smyrna said, okay, this is the way. We believe in the God of the Bible. It's true. If they all said this, if all the mayors said, okay, everyone, you have to do this. This is where we're going. This is truth. I tell you what, if you talk to me, I would be levitating, glowing. I would just be teeth everywhere. It would be the goosebump mania of my life, what I dream for. So let's see his reaction. Because Jonah did this. He walked in, he was finally obedient. In some ways he was obedient. I still think he had some issues in his heart, which we see later. So he did this. Now we get to see his backward reaction. Let's look at this in verse 1. But to Jonah, this seemed very wrong. This seemed very wrong. And he became angry. The Hebrew for angry means his body temperature went up. You know those moments when you're just about to lose it, your body temperature goes up. It wasn't just like, oh, I was a little upset that now they're spared. He was enraged. He was hot angry. Why this reaction, Jonah? What is up with you? Why is his perspective so messed up after seeing all of this, seeing this fruit from his labor? In his heart, this is the racist side of him, in his heart, he did not want them to be spared. Because the Ninevites, Israelites, they hated each other. Ninevites had done horrible, horrible things. So in his heart, he has all these memories here from what they have done. And he's thinking, no, there's no way, God, you could extend your mercy, definitely not your grace, to the Ninevites. He's thinking, there's no way. We are the special people. I don't want this to expand to them. It needs to stay with us. His national pride was getting in the way, and this was stirring up the bitterness, which now manifested into anger. He's ticked off because of this issue in his heart. Now, he's struggling with their success. Why did God not follow through? Justice has failed. In his mind, it's kind of like two different splits I look at it. He was actually angry at the Ninevites because they were spared. He was angry that they did not have justice in his eyes. So they were spared. I say a branch over here is he was actually angry at God. He's like, God, I thought you were consistent in your character. You said you would bring consequences to them, and now you spared the whole place. God, what's up with that? I was hoping for the fireworks show, lasers, kapoof, vaporizing these people. We see next week he actually gets a seat and gets like his popcorn to get ready for the show because he still doesn't believe they're going to be spared. What is going on, God? He wanted revenge. In other words, he wanted payback. He didn't want the balance, which we say is justice. He wanted revenge because of this bitterness in his heart. It was swelling to the surface. Now look at this. We enter into a prayer. Now Jonah, we saw a prayer he had when he was in the belly of the whale. And now we get to see a different prayer. Watch his tone and check out his heart posture as he enters his prayer in verse 2. Look at this. It says this. He prayed to the Lord. Isn't this what I said, Lord, when I was still at home? That is what I tried to forestall by fleeing to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. You can almost listen to this in a tone of like, I knew it. I knew those were your traits. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I didn't want it to be true, but I knew it. In this, look at how he prays. If you compare the text of his prayer in the belly of the whale, desperation, because when we are afflicted, we pray very differently. Now he's out, the grace of God extended on him. He has his chance of life. Things are bliss for ministry leaders. Fruit, yeah, I'd say he saw some fruits, but not in his heart. Look at his heart posture. Challenging God, saying, okay, I know this is your character. I know all these things. But why? Why do you have to be so consistent? I want to see the wrath from you. I want to see this. But friends, as we know, there's something different about our prayer life when life is bliss and good. I remember years ago, when I was 19, my friend Justin and I, when you live in Oregon and you're 19, you love to explore. It's a huge state. So we would go out on these adventures and live off the land. We'd like make loincloths and have spears and sorry, on TMI, but we would have coolers of food and just gas tanks and just go, and you can go for forever and not see people. And so we were out there up in the middle of nowhere on this hillside of this mountain range, and it was in the evening, and when you're 19, of course, you know everything, and everyone is dumb, so we're 19, and we were on the top of the world, single, just rocking it, living the wild life, covered in dirt, living life out of my truck. And then all of a sudden, a lightning bolt hits a tree in front of us. This massive explosion as we see all the dry timber, all that's around with all these pine trees that were super dry in the season in the summer. Kaboom! And it was dry. We didn't have any rain. So we see this fire explode through the tree. And you see the embers blow out to the other trees. And we're up there. We're not on a road. I'm not cool. I'm not on Tinka. We're young. I don't have a cool Jeep. I have no hope. The simple little GMC that can hardly do anything. And we see this fire start to grow as we're up on the mountain. And I'm looking at Justin. He's looking at me. I'm like, dude, we got to get out of here. And this moments where we go from being on the top of the world, okay, almost like, oh, we don't even need God. We got our muscles and our spears, and I got a .22 pistol and a truck, own the world. At that moment, it's like, Jesus, okay, you're in control. I'm down here. God, anything. You name it. I'm sorry for the profanity yesterday. So sorry. Just like full confession mode. All of a sudden, you realize your position when you are afflicted. And Jonah, out of the affliction, experiencing grace, look how his posture changes. Challenging God. I knew all these things about you. I knew this about your character. Fill in the blank. Now, we see this almost, I would say, it was kind of a mockery of God. But at the same time, he's acknowledging true claims about God's character. So he has some truth in this. He is speaking truth about who God is. Growing up in little Jewish school for little Jews, he knew the Torah, he knew the character of God, he knew the attributes of God. So he has this right. He's making truth claims about God. But here he is, throwing his words around as a result of the bitterness in his heart now coming up and festering out into his mouth and out into God's ears. Bitterness now consuming him. Now we see why we should not trust our tongues when our hearts are bitter. Verse 3, look at this. Now, he says this, "Now, Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live." Jonah, Mr. Emo, just entered into the scene. It happened way before 2002. Like we had emo way back then. This moment of like, woe is me. Gonna paint my fingernails black and just go off in this weird thing. Just let me die, God. In his heart, he would rather die than face the truth of God's justice according to God. He didn't want the Ninevites to be alive. He says, God, just take me. And with his second chance, he wants God to take him away. Now, he definitely did not want to see them repent and turn. Jonah, consumed with bitterness, rather than seeing the glory of Israel transferred to the Gentiles, he did not want to face this, as if there was not enough grace to actually extend from the Jews to the Gentiles, as if there's some sort of tank of grace. He thought, maybe God, we're at the bottom level here. We need to save some for us. Bitterness in Jonah. Now, we see this also with Paul. Paul mentions in the New Testament, he says it's better for him to die than to live. Paul, who desired to depart and be with Christ, which he saw as far better. But here with Jonah, it's just a language of stupidity, a language of bitterness, of pride, of racism. Fill in the blank. Jonah, just a bad example for us. Bitterness only hurts one person. This morning, if you are harboring some sort of bitterness in your life for maybe something that someone said to you a long time ago, or maybe even this morning, if you harbor this, your bitterness only really does hurt one person. And it's not the person that you're resenting. It's the person you see in the mirror. That's where the damage is inflicted. It's inflicted on us when we harbor this for so long. It just eats us from the inside. We see this with Jonah, and his words are just thrown around everywhere as bitterness comes to the surface. And now we see God, Mr. Socratic approach God, does this. He asks a question. Look at this in verse 4. God says this, "But the Lord replied, 'Is it right for you to be angry?'" Spouses, I'm sure you've tried this with your spouse. It doesn't usually work with us. When they are hot and they're ticked off, and if we say, "You don't have a right to be angry," it doesn't usually go well, right? We tried this with our girls. We talked about this morning as we were walking through this passage, and they're like, girls, like when we see them ticked off over, as adults, we see this as a minor thing, as a tear in a little lovey, or maybe the food isn't, how they want it to be perfect. And there's tears. We have emotions. And usually mom and I say, you shouldn't be angry. It's like taking the gas can and just pouring it on the fire. It doesn't work. I'm sure you've tasted this in your marriages. You shouldn't be upset. It doesn't help. But God has permission to ask these questions. Is it right for you, Jonah, to be angry? It reminds me of the Garden of Eden. Where are you, Adam and Eve? God speaking down to our level, relaxing his muscle just a little bit to play our games and to talk with us because he knows everything. There are no secrets. And here he is asking this question. He's pretty much saying, Jonah, get over yourself. Get over yourself. But now he sees that Jonah is angry because he thinks that justice has failed. Justice has failed. It was due for these people, God. Why did you not follow through? Justice has completely failed. So Jonah, obviously we don't hear the tone. There's a lot of assumption of how this conversation is going on between him and God. But now he's condemning God for not being angry. But now God is challenging Jonah for being angry. And Jonah was feeling the frustration of not understanding God's actions in the light of his character. And now Jonah is bothered. Why didn't God just unleash it and let him have it? Come on, God. Why don't you follow through? Now, maybe this morning you have the question that so many people ask is, why does God just not stop all the evil in the world? We've talked about that a little bit before here, maybe a couple months ago. Why does he just not stop it all? We see some sort of atrocity, maybe happening in the Middle East right now, or we see certain things happening with hackers, and we just think, okay, maybe our mindset is straight to revenge, not so much justice. We think, well, why does God not just stop all the evil in the world? This would be a great place to live. We wouldn't have to worry about safety for our kids' wing. We would just trust everybody. Because if God were to stop all the evil in the world, he would have to stop you. And he would have to stop me. Because I do evil every day in my thought life. If you could see my thoughts on the screen today, it would be so embarrassing for me as a pastor of this church. God cannot be around sin. We see this through the entire Bible. He cannot face sin. And if you're thinking, well, how do you define between like a sin and then something evil? And if we start drawing lines, then in a way we start playing God. You know, so you might say, well, 73 and a 65, that's just kind of bad. You know, it's not really evil, but 120, though that's evil. Then we start being the judge and trying to figure out, okay, what is evil? Evil is any sin, anything that is away from God's holiness is evil. And we do it every day, but we're pointing fingers at other people all the time. So be careful when you ask for God to pour out his justice on this planet, because he would have to start with you. And he'd have to start with me. So here he is, asking the question, why do you want to die? Why? Why is this going on? Why are you angry? Why are you upset? Good questions from God. With the situation of justice and misunderstanding of justice. And here, I'll just say that Jonah, so many mistakes that he's making, what he's not doing is what we should all be doing. We should be celebrating when sinners confess. That is a key priority of the church, of any church should be that. When someone comes forward and they tell me through an email or a phone call, we meet in person, and this happened a lot, they confess something, I'm like, this is such a God moment right now. The whole world is against what you just did. The whole culture just says, you just be you. If you live a great life, you don't have to apologize, and you do all this stuff, you don't have to worry about forgiveness. No, that's completely a part of the story of the Bible, of seeking forgiveness and asking for forgiveness, which God can extend to us. So here he is, whining, ignoring the joy of heaven when they found out what happened in Nineveh. Bad prophet. And this morning, friends, I know most likely all of you have someone in your life that you're thinking of this morning. Maybe there's one person, maybe there's a mob of people that you have bitterness towards them. Maybe is some sort of comparison game. They got the job, you didn't get the job. They got the athletic achievement. They got the part in the play. And so you get this bitterness, and maybe it started with comparison. We know that comparison is the thief of joy. And so it swells up, and then you wonder why when you're around them, your tongue wants to just slice them. Because I know for myself, it went from just journaling back in the day. It was like I would use my tongue to just rip people apart in this quiet, passive way. It was horrible. I still have to fight that in marriage today, is not to use my tongue to cut, but to use it in a loving, humble way. But for you this morning, maybe you have someone. Maybe there's someone in your life that you are praying for revenge on them because they wronged you, maybe when you were a kid. So you're praying for this, maybe not even looking for God's justice to be on them. You just want revenge. You want them to taste what you tasted when they did that to you. Maybe you feel that this morning. Maybe for some of you, that person is God. Maybe you've been raising a fist to him. God, how dare you let this happen to me? How dare you let this situation unfold in my family life? How dare you let this financial issue happen? How dare you let this addiction take over me? Maybe this morning it's against him. Now, often we have our words that come to the surface that are toxic because of that bitterness. I'll say this: the heart of every problem is the problem of the heart. Every issue on earth today is because of a problem of the heart. And that's exactly where Jonah's problem was found. It was a problem of his heart. A problem of his heart. So friends, never trust your tongue when your heart is bitter. The damage we can do when we harbor bitterness. This morning, friends, I'm going to pray for you. And if there's someone in your life that this morning, we're just going to have a little bit of quiet when the music plays. If you just want to confess to God and you want to say, hey, I forgive that person for what they did to me. This is a perfect morning to do that. Because later we're going to take communion and enter the Lord's Supper and focus on that and what He did for us. But you need to cleanse yourself first. Maybe there's someone in the room that you are harboring bitterness against today. And you need to approach them today. Well, I want to give you that chance. I want to say this before I pray, that the beautiful part of God and His justice is that most of you know this, I want to make sure this is clear, is that He cannot face sin, so He can't be around evil. And so His justice was poured out on the one He loved the most. And that was His Son, His perfect sacrifice. He said, I'm going to pour this all on you, Jesus. So when Jesus died on the cross, He took everything that was wrong, He made it right. So it's through His blood, and it's through us believing in this act of grace. That's how we are forgiven. We don't have to harbor anything anymore. We can just give it to Him. All the sins, we cast to Him. He takes all of that and He just casts it into the deepest part of the sea. That's what our God does for us because He loves us. So friends, when I pray for this morning, think of that person and ask God to give you freedom from your bitterness from them. Jesus, God, I come before you this morning. I think about all of the people in this room, all of our friends online tuning in today. So many people, and maybe there's so much bitterness about what happened in the past, who did what, who said what, who bullied us way back in the day. And Jesus, it is so toxic if we dwell in bitterness. God, because we know that we cannot trust the things we say. We know it rises to the surface if we have bitterness in our hearts, God. So please help this church this morning, Jesus. Help these people as they think about that person, whoever it is. Give them freedom. Have them be able to confess to you. If they need to contact that person today, give this person the bravery to make that phone call and say, you know what? I forgive you. I trust in a just God. And God, we trust your timing. We're not supposed to play you. We do trust you in how you work, in your character. And Jesus, I pray this in your name. Amen.